Welcome back to Careers with Miss V. I am so excited to bring another incredible guest. Today we are meeting with Anthony Copeland, who is the Technology Integrator at American School of Dubai. Welcome, Anthony. It's so great to have you with me today.
Thank you so much, Maria. I'm excited to have a conversation.
Super, super exciting. So much to learn, so much to gain insights from. And before we jump into your current role as a Technology Integrator, which is a really interesting job title. So we definitely want to go into that. But before we do, I want to take you back to the younger Anthony. When did you know that being in education was what you wanted to be doing?
Yeah, I think that happened whilst I was at university, actually. I didn't really know what I wanted to be whilst I was at high school. I just knew what I enjoyed. So I took a degree in chemistry at the time, and that was a subject I very much enjoyed. And then whilst being at university, that put me in much closer contact with industry, with research and design. But it was always the kind of science communication type roles. So trying to bring science down to the learner's level and to communicate that. I found those types of roles really enjoyable. And I think from then I just kind of narrowed it down to dealing with high school students and then trying to make science fun and exciting for them.
Then take us back to the academic pathway that you chose. So you said, you were interested in chemistry, but for a young person thinking, how do I get to where Anthony is right now? Take us through that timeline of what you studied, where you did that, and how you made those choices.
Sure. So I studied A-levels in the UK, and I took chemistry, biology, physics, and mathematics. I actually think I was influenced by my chemistry teacher, maybe more than I perhaps should have been. I don't necessarily recommend following a subject because of the relationship that you've got with your teacher, but I think that just does happen. And sometimes you can kind of imprint how much you enjoy learning from a teacher onto the subject itself. And I think that did happen to some degree with chemistry. So then I went to the University of Sheffield, where I studied my Bachelor of Science in chemistry. And then I took a year out after my 3-year degree and then went back to university to become a teacher. Now, at the time in the UK, there was a shortage in physics teachers, and they were offering something called a subject knowledge enhancement course, which meant if you'd read a degree that was similar to physics, kind of in the same ballpark, you could retrain to be a physics teacher, and you'd have your course fees covered, you'd have a living allowance. So that actually, at the time, I'd just finished a degree in chemistry, and I very much enjoyed chemistry. I thought, okay, at the cost of 1 year, I could have my course fees paid, I could have a living allowance whilst I'm going through university, and then I'm actually qualified to be either a chemistry or a physics teacher. Chemistry by degree, physics by that 1 year subject knowledge enhancement. So I decided to do that. So it took me 2 years then to get my PGCE, so to get my teaching certificate. I then taught in the UK for 1 year, which is something that has to happen to get your QTS, your qualified teaching certificate status. Sorry. And then as soon as I'd done that, I think I always knew that I wanted teaching to be a platform for travel for me as well, and I wanted to experience teaching in other countries. As soon as I had my QTS, I then moved to Dubai, where I taught science for 3 years. And then I went to Hong Kong for 4 years. And now I'm back in Dubai. So I've been out of the UK for 9 years in total, and that's been 5 years in Dubai and 4 years in Hong Kong.
And I appreciate that you bring up the idea of traveling, because that's something that young people don't really think about when they're thinking of their careers. And it's only when we go into what are you hoping to achieve from your life experiences when you're thinking of careers education. You mentioned that you always knew that travel was something that you were interested in. When did you understand that teaching can be the platform? you did say that you hope that it could, but when was it clear for you that teaching could be that platform?
Yeah, so I mentioned taking a year out between university and reading my subject knowledge enhancement year. That year was originally when I left university. I was applying to join something called the JET scheme, which I think stands for Japanese English Teaching, maybe Japan English Teaching Program. And that would be it's quite a difficult scheme to get on. At least I'm pretty sure it is, because I didn't get on, unfortunately. But the idea then was to actually do a bit of traveling whilst teaching English. And then when I didn't get onto the JET scheme, that's when I started thinking, well, I think that was the first sense I got of, oh, teaching happens everywhere, and teaching in English happens almost everywhere. So it is actually, that's a potential avenue for me to actually travel and work. So yeah, I didn't get onto the JET scheme, but then when I went through my PGCE, I think it was always the intention to then go on and teach internationally.
Fantastic. I want to bring you now into today, into where you are right now. What does it mean when you say you're a technology integrator? It sounds like a great title, but what does it really mean?
Yeah, so I'd say as late as 2016, when I was in Hong Kong, I couldn't have answered that question. So I think there's a lot of mystery around that role. And I suppose my best answer for what is the purpose of that position, I think as technology is getting more complex, and we're seeing more and more technology being fed into schools, there's suddenly this great field of technological knowledge that's almost required in order to facilitate the use of that technology. Now, teachers are, by their discipline, by their degree, they're very knowledgeable in the content knowledge that they're teaching. And they've gone through their teaching certificates, so they've got a lot of pedagogical knowledge as well. They've got the knowledge of how to kind of construct what they're teaching into activities and kind of learning activities. But now there's this third field, and that's the technological knowledge. And I think rather than expecting every teacher to be a master of all three of these domains, you're inviting in a second body who has that technological knowledge. Now, as a technology integrator, I might not have that content knowledge that the teacher has. So they're experts in their field. They might be an expert in history or an expert in geography. But the common ground that we can meet on, because of my background as a teacher, is that pedagogical knowledge. So they decide what the best teaching practice is for teaching their content, and then I can suggest the best technology for kind of enhancing that pedagogical activity, that teaching activity.
That's absolutely incredible. It sounds like you're becoming a translator as well, helping teachers and educators understand what's out there and how that's evolving, which is definitely, it has been noticed as being that big gap between what we're calling the skills gap. And so with you having to do that, when did you think this would be a great move? Because I'm thinking in terms of what young people believe is the linear path. So I'm now hearing you say, I'm going to be doing technology integration. However, that sounds like you're leaving the classroom, the traditional sense of leaving the classroom. And for a teacher listening to this, is that a safe choice to be making? Will that be something that will help you evolve in your career? Or do you think that that is something that, if you look at it through the lens of an educator, might be a sidestep that won't be seen as something accrediting, betterness to your education degree? And I think young people don't understand the politics behind career development and the politics behind evolving in one's career. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think what you've touched on there, the sidestep, there's a very notable sidestep that happened in 2016 when I joined this school in Hong Kong. Suddenly the tech integrator role was something I was made aware of. But what I'd like to kind of stress in this conversation is, I think even getting that position was a direct result of the kind of hobbies and interests that I maintained throughout my time as a teacher. I was already spending evenings and weekends coding for fun, and I was already building little electronics things at home and kind of broadcasting that. So as soon as that position opened up in Hong Kong, I remember before I even knew that this role was opening up, I was contacted by the head of the department to say that she'd really like me to interview for this position. And I think that's just, if there's one thing that's shown me, it's keep your interests, keep your hobbies, and they can so easily kind of fold into your professional life later on. That was a real kind of turning point for me, for realizing that these things that I enjoy doing in my spare time can actually facilitate the direction that I take professionally.
Brilliant. I love this. I love this conversation. I think it's really insightful for not just young people, but parents and educators as well. Talk to me a little bit about some of your top 3 tips. So I heard you saying, don't confuse career with identity. When you start working, it'll be too easy to let work define who you are, and that person becomes blurred. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is just off the back of my own experiences. I think when I was a kind of young adult, a young professional, and I just started my career, I noticed that every time I went to a party or I met somebody new, that the second question you're always asked is, "Oh, what do you do?" And it's so easy to feel that what you do 8 hours a day entirely defines you. And I think it can be quite tempting then to put all of your identity into your career. And I think if I'd done that, then I'd never have become a technology integrator. I think if I threw myself entirely into teaching and thought, well, as a science teacher, why am I building Arduino circuits in my spare time? Or why am I learning to code? I'm a teacher, not a developer. Then I never would have had that opportunity further down the line. And I think the best way of making sure that you follow a path that is kind of true for you is by keeping that side, that element of yourself, what you enjoy and what kind of you thrive on. I think I've heard the term passion points, right? Whatever your passion points are, don't let those fade away.
I love that. Tell me more about valuing your time. You say that it's important to realize that you can spend less money, but you can't buy more time. I love that. It does, however, sound a bit like those quotes that we read about and are very often shared. What does that mean essentially for you at a core foundation?
I think it's taken me almost 10 years to really realize this myself. So if you can realize this at the start of your career journey, then kudos. Well done. I think for the longest time, the first metric that you're really interested in when taking a new job is, well, what does it pay? And it's so easy for your salary to become the only indicator of how good your job is. Almost, it's the first thing anybody asks about a new job. Having done a bunch of roles now, I'm starting to realize just how many things are at play in terms of the value of a position. And I think it's so much more than what is your employer paying you for your time, but also how is your employer dictating the way in which you use that time. And that line I used, I was trying to kind of summarize this idea that the time that you're selling essentially to your employer, that's non-fungible, to use a term that's quite popular now. That can't be switched back. You can't reclaim that time. Whereas if you have a job that maybe gives you more opportunities in terms of learning and of growth, even if the salary is a little bit lower, you can just kind of reduce your own cost of living. You can't do that with the time that you're giving up here. And I think, yeah, it's taken me a while to really comfortably admit that. I think for 10 years, I've always thought, well, I'll just look for both. And I think even that in itself can be dangerous.
Very, very dangerous. Lots to learn from. I want to take you back to that first job you had when you were 15.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that experience of, as you described, washing pots in a basement restaurant. What did you learn from that experience, and how did it shape the man that you are today?
Yeah, it was the restaurant that my mum worked in when she when she was quite young as well, actually. And because she had such a great relationship with the managers, she was able to get me a summer job there. So I worked full time for the entire summer, and I think I was just sort of towards the later end of 15, and it was really hard work. It was really hard work, but it was the first time that I had money that was mine. Actually, I was managing to save money and then afford my own things. So I think that probably taught me everything my mum hoped it would teach me. I think after that, I was a lot more understanding, I think, with the value of the things that I was asking for from my parents. And I do think it was a real moment of growth for me. I suddenly realized that money represents, and I suppose this feeds back on what I've just been saying, money does kind of represent time. You've kind of sold that bit of time, and then you're spending that. So I think I was a lot more sensible, I think, with what I expected my parents to spend money on.
Also, wearing the hat of a careers practitioner, I also think that experience taught you resilience. It taught you discipline, and it taught you time management, and so many other things that I think as adults we take for granted, but they're the assumed skills that young people don't learn in a classroom. They learn through experiences. Anthony, right now watching this will be a young person thinking, how can I become a technology integrator? Do they need to be teachers to become a technology integrator? Now that you're doing this role, how does a young person prepare for a similar role?
Yeah, I think there are two really interesting routes into being a pedagogical technologist. I think that's probably the best term I've got for it, or technology integrator. And actually, it highlights kind of confusion within the role itself that I see in schools. All of the technology integrators that I know, they're kind of on this sliding scale between somebody who is really, really knowledgeable about technology, and actually their role is confused with technology educator. So maybe they're teaching Microsoft Office or they're teaching programming. And because of this wealth of knowledge they've got in technology, they're able to kind of meet at that pedagogical level. And then there's kind of the other side to it, which is people who are just really good with educational technology. So maybe they really know the Google Apps for Education really well, or they're an expert at using Edpuzzle, or they're an expert at using Kahoot and kind of all the teaching and learning software that we do. And then they tend to focus much more on, well, how can we enhance the content knowledge that the teacher's bringing in? And I think they're both valid routes into this field. So you can either specialize in computer science and programming and coding and then end up teaching that, and then kind of it's your content knowledge that feeds into the role, or you can become an educator in absolutely any other subject and just get really good at enhancing other content knowledge with technology. And I see that, yeah, sometimes when I meet another technology integrator, I kind of need to assess where they are on that scale. Is this somebody who is a technology teacher, so they get called on a lot for using technology in the classroom? Or is this a really techie teacher who's able to enhance kind of any teaching and learning with technology?
Amazing. I love that you've mentioned there's more than one way into that career, which is important. And I think really releases some of that pressure young people have in having to make one choice and feeling like it was right or wrong. And often I will tell young people, there's always more than one way into a pathway, but you have to really find out what it is that interests you and then learn how to get into roles just like that. Anthony, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you today and learning about your career insights, and also learning about what you do currently and helping the youth learn from you. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Maria.
And that brings me to the end of another incredible conversation. Today, I was speaking with Anthony Copeland, who is the Technology Integrator at the American School of Dubai. Thank you for watching, and I will see you at my next career interview.